Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So in today's lesson, to start the show, I want to go into ADX, but I'm going to focus in on the DI side of the equation. There are three lines associated with the ADX indicator, and the ADX line itself really does show the strength of a trend, but we want to focus in on who's winning the battle. And that's what I want to talk about today. So let's go ahead and look at this agenda. So I want you to understand the DI side, the directional indexes. And we want to know who is on top, which means who's in control. And I'm going to explain that and what that means. Also want to key in on the 25 level. The final part I want to discuss is how when we're looking for a reversal, I actually like to look for the lower side, the side that's losing, and see how they're acting. And I'll show you how that can play a role in a reversal. Once we get through that, we'll go through the symbol requests that came through. Okay, so I'm using a weekly chart of Alphabet for this example. And if we notice, we have this really nice cycle down from we bottom in 2020, turn up, and have a very nice trend to the upside, then kind of top out at the beginning of 2022, have a nice downtrend until the beginning of 2023, and now we've turned back up for this year. So it's a nice example to show a couple of turning points and how the DI lines can be of help. Now, if you notice, I have eliminated the ADX line. I've taken it off, just kind of removed it so you can clearly see what's going on between the buyers and the sellers. So the green line represents plus DI, and that is showing us how strong the buyers are. And we want to keep an eye on that as the stock is moving up, because we want to see if buyers continuously confirming the trend strength of a move. Now, the red DI is the negative DI line in red is showing the strength of the seller. So if we're trending to the downside, we kind of want to watch and see if that line is showing real strength. Now we can use the 25 level to gauge just how strong it is. And you can see when green DI is showing enough strength where it can drift down a little bit below the 25 level, but it shouldn't drop down a lot below 25. And then if you notice here, we bounced off 25, stayed above 25, well above 25, and then came down here, bounced off of it, and then eventually broke through. And that really signifies the peak. Let's just line that up. The break there really lines up with the peak when the buyers show a real loss of momentum or strength here by crossing back down through the 25 line. Similarly, if we go and look at red DI, and you can see how it crossed above, and then it did drift back down below, but then it got right back above. The key here is how weak the buyers were. There was no sign of buying improvement. So the difference between these lines were still pretty significant, showing that the red or the sellers were still in command. Then we got back up and held the 25 line, and then broke it again. And you can see what's going on here as we bottom. Right? The red DI is crossing down, and this ends up being for good. Now, one of the things that highlighted at the beginning here, we had a double bottom in price, and this made a significantly lower high, so we had a little bit of divergence. Same thing held true here. If you look at this move to the upside, and we make a higher high in price, and then look at how big of a divergence there was at the peak between price and the green DI, which was failing miserably in terms of strength. So we want to keep an eye on the 25 line. We want to keep an eye on the level that's on the DI line that's on top, because when green is on top, that means the buyers are in control and we're in an uptrend. And as long as these lines are separating, the blue line is going to continue to rise. Okay, the moment the green line starts to come down and the red line starts to come up, you're going to see the blue line, the ADX line, start to drop off, because again, it's the difference between those two. It's a moving average of the difference between the two. Now, one of the things I really want to point out is what I like to look at is as we're moving up, yes, I'm keeping an eye on these peaks, But one of the key things that can give us an early warning signal is what's going on with the lower end, because we can see that we peaked out, the sellers peaked out here, and then we made a lower high, right? So here's a peak, we make a lower high, another lower high, another lower high, call it a double top, another lower high, and then look at here, really right about the end, right around September, something like that, we peak out. The sellers are starting to show the first sign of improvement since this whole move started. It gave us an early warning signal that something is shifting here. And if we notice from there, we make a higher bottom, and then we make kind of a double top, and then we make a higher high, and we're kind of trending to the upside in red, as red is basically on top. Now, when that's taking place, the green is actually making a lower high, and then it made another lower high here, another lower high, another lower high, another one, and then we start to see a shift taking place, which is really confirmed in early 2023. So do you see how we can watch the lower end, and as long as that's making lower highs and lower lows, but mostly lower highs, then we know that the buyers just don't have enough strength, or the lower end, the group that's not in control just doesn't have enough strength to flip the trend around. So if we keep an eye on this, we can really be early, I think, and see some signs of a reversal taking place. Because if you just look at the standard, the way people look at ADX, the ADX will be dropping, and we have all these lines really looking like nothing is really going on. But look at the difference between the green DI here, and look at the strength of this move. Now this is happening below 25, and it's just barely crossing above the red, but look at how much improvement there is in the buyers. So I really like to keep an eye on this, and I like to keep an eye on the peaks of the lower DI line. And this can give us a really good early warning sign. As we're watching for a top now taking place in Alphabet, look at how this peaked out. So this peaked out here, pretty much right at the low. That's where the buyers, the sellers peaked out, right? And then they made a lower high, lower high, lower high. They're just making another lower high essentially. And I don't even know if I would count that as a lower high, because we really didn't make a pivot here. But versus this, we clearly made a lower peak. So now if we make a higher high above this peak, we know that the sellers are starting to show signs of a shift. And that can give us an early warning sign that there's something changing here. So this is a great thing to be on the lookout for, where we don't just necessarily have to focus on the ADX line itself. Let's go ahead and move on to the individual stock symbols. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. My research can be found at rabelstockresearch.com. For those of you who are new or want to learn a little bit more about trend and momentum in multiple time frames, I am offering my book at a discount right now in a PDF format. If you go to rabelstockresearch.com/book, you can find out the information. As we start looking at the symbols, so I like to start with a few indexes and then go into the individual symbols. Now, I have 5 charts up, and I want to just make sure anyone new to the show, I've got a monthly in the bottom left, weekly bottom right. I've got a daily chart here. I do have an hourly chart in the middle up top, and then up in the left I've got another weekly. If you notice, I've got this zigzag overlaying the price chart. I've got the relative strength versus the S&P with the 30-period moving average, and then I've got the RSIs, both 20 in red and the RSI 5 in gray. So I really like this look. When I get a call from an institutional client asking me about a stock, this is pretty much the format I'm looking at, trying to look at everything that I can find all at one time. So we'll start with the QQQ. Now, let's just look at this monthly chart, because I think this is a big key here. We've made a pretty substantial move. We crossed the declining 18-month line, and we have continued to push to the upside. Now, normally when I see a cross of a declining line, I'm expecting some kind of a pullback to that line at some point. Now, what could take place here is we could just kind of maybe this pushes up one more time and sort of forms some kind of a consolidation while this cups around and catches up, as opposed to price pulling down to it. The price sits where it is, and the moving average sort of cups around and ends up catching up. I do think there's some issues up here at 400, so we could make a little bit more of a push here potentially. Maybe pull back first, push up one more time, and then run into some resistance here that allows the moving averages to catch up a little bit. It would be really rare for this to just keep going with this having this declining line and never checking back to it, never pausing at all. Now, there is some encouraging signs with the MACD turning up, and even green DI has crossed back above 25. So when we look at the NASDAQ 100, which obviously has our Magnificent Seven now. They don't call it the Fang anymore. You got to come up with a new name for these things every single day, it seems like. But that is what's leading the charge here. We've got these stocks like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. I'm going to cover a few of them today that were requested this week. So, but let's just look at this weekly chart. So we've got a really nice trend in place. 18 above the 40, both lines rising, and they're rising while the 18 is rising at a slightly faster rate. It's really a pretty solid trend. Look at how strong the momentum is. Notice how the green DI is staying above 25 through this pullback. So that's a good sign. Now, we've got on one end of the spectrum, we've got really strong ADX. On the other end, we've got a MACD that's crossing down through the signal line. And so the way I want you to look at this, I keep both of these up, and one, you could think that one's giving one signal and one's giving another, but the way I look at it is this is saying yes or no, okay? This is how I do it. So this is a yes, all right? This is definitely a yes stock or a yes market. I want to be playing this trade. This is something I'm very interested in based on this. Now, this is telling me now or later, okay? So is it now? Is this the time I want to do this? And I would say, no, I'm probably more of a later guy, meaning I want a second entry. I want some kind of a pullback. Now, maybe it's going to push up and test this high a little bit more, but I still think we get some form of a check back. When I see this, I tend to think more of some form of a check back, double bottom, or maybe we pull back harder even when this eventually decides to pull back. And then if that's the case, I want to see this come back up through here. If it's really mild, then you don't necessarily have to look for a new breakout. You could just play it off of the moving average. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we want to use ADX for determining which stocks we want to do or which markets we want to play. This definitely fits into that camp of something I definitely want to be watching and playing. This is helping me with the timing. I just think there's a better chance that we consolidate a little bit more before this takes off and really provides the next big leg to the upside. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing this here as this is coming up through and showing a lot of strength, even if this is down like this. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I'm playing an individual stock or a market like that, then I have to put the stop way down here. It's a lot of risk. And so that's why I typically want to see something like that where I can put a stop, have more confidence in putting the stop either below the moving average or the last low. So that's my thinking there. When we look at the daily chart, I think we want some kind of a check back to the 18. We had pretty serious overrun in the MACD. Now, there's no strength in the sellers on the ADX line, but we did have a lot of overrun, and I normally look for the second entry. So all we're looking for, and this will show up on the weekly chart as well as a pullback, is if we get a dip here and it forms a pinch play just over the course of the next couple days and it's really orderly, then you could play that to the upside and keep the risk down that way. So that's probably what I'd be watching for. I wanted to make sure I covered that in depth. Let's look at the IWM. Now we're bouncing off So this is key because my concern was we were going to come down and break these lines, which we're not doing. We're coming back to the 18 and the 40 and we're holding. MACD appears to be holding. So this is a good sign. The key level to watch is 200 up here. Nothing really happens unless we get through 200. Now, I want to make sure you get the difference between the QQQ and the IWM. There is zero momentum here. That's really not that much different than the Qs, although the green DI is crossing above 25 on the Qs, right? This is nowhere near. This is even below the red DI. This is showing no strength. But look at this. We have no momentum here. And actually the last, when the blue line crossed above here, it was based on the sellers. It wasn't based on the buyers. In fact, the sellers were stronger than the last up move for the buyers. So we don't have any convincing evidence that the buyers are taking over and ready to break this thing out right now. So as a result of that, I have to sort of assume we're range bound until we break out. Now, when I see low ADX, and essentially low ADX again, I need a breakout pattern. There's nothing to do until we break out. If this breaks out, I think that's a really good sign for the market, but I mean, I'm not going to pre-guess that. We can see how important that level is when you look at the zigzag. Okay, let's look at SLV real quick. Now, low ADX, low ADX, low ADX. We have low ADX on all three time frames. I want to go to the weekly chart, and I'm saying, look, I'm not doing anything unless we get a breakout here, and maybe even a breakout like this. Right? I'm looking for something a little bit more meaningful. I do like the fact that the MACD is showing this little reverse divergence. We've got a higher low in price and a lower low in MACD. So I am encouraged by that, but I still want to see this at least take out this prior high or something like that. Don't get me wrong. I like the looks of this, holding the 18-month line, MACD improving, MACD reverse divergence here, little sign of buyers showing up. But I need some signs of strength, at a minimum getting through 23 before I'd be interested. All right, I wanted to revisit the CRM. I had this question last week, and obviously they came out with earnings. Now, last week I was basically saying I felt like this is going to need more time. Like, we had this MACD coming down. Now, this is still strong, and I want to give that credit that this was strong. But this is telling me, again, more of a timing issue. I don't think this is going to be able to get through this. I think we come back down at some point and test. Now, if we don't test, we might come down and fill the gap a little bit. Maybe come down and test here as opposed to coming down and testing here. 200 looks like really strong support to me now. So I did want to point that out. But again, when I look at the monthly chart, it just doesn't look like it's ready to take off yet. I would be more inclined to think we spend a few more months just working sideways above the 200 area before it's ready to go and make an assault on the next resistance zone. All right, VIPS. Okay, so I like what's going on with the monthly. There is improvement. The monthly line is, the 18-month is cupping around. We've got a little bit of air to fill in because we got a little stretched away from it. And the momentum signs aren't all that powerful, neither is the volume. So I am inclined to think that this is going to take a little bit more time. Now, when I go to the weekly chart, we've actually broken the 18. I do think there's pretty good support underneath, but it does look like the MACD wants to work its way down a little bit closer to the zero line. And so, I'm not in a big hurry here, especially with a declining 18-day. I think the first entry that I would look at to be aggressive is I'd be looking at this in an undercut and rally pattern. And if this is an undercut and rally, we're going to hold here and come back up through here. And that's really where I'd be interested. Probably coming up through 17 or something like that would be the first opportunity, I think, to play this. That would be recrossing the 18-week. Clearly getting back above the 40-month and then getting back above the 40-day. So something to be on the lookout for. But I have a feeling it's just going to kind of hang around in here and channel sideways in the near term, just because there's not a whole lot of momentum right now. Okay, NN, this is the exact opposite of that. This is absolute power. Look at the momentum behind this move. You see how this was a stage 4 decline, stage 1 base, and now I would consider this the start of a new uptrend. Now, we've got a huge amount of momentum here, and there is some risk in this. These $4, anything that's a single digit, right? Anything under 10, it's really hard to control the risk. So I think if you're going to do this, you have to play smaller size and give it more room. Or if you're going to play it off the daily, even then I'd play it with smaller size and give it more room. I know that this trend looks pretty good, but there's a lot of volatility in stocks like this, and just any kind of a little dip. I mean, a move from 459 down to 4 is a pretty big percentage move. So it's hard to really control the risk in a way that I would like to do it. You know, trying to keep it somewhere in that 10% range or something like that for my entry point. You do that on a stock like this, and you could easily get stopped out. So you just got to be careful with that. Now, I mean, look, there's power here. So there could be a way to do it where you maybe start with a smaller position. You scale your way in, start with a smaller position, see if it firms up, see if the moving averages tighten to it, and then you could add to it along the way. Okay, NVIDIA. So the big number up at 500, right? We're working our way up towards 500. We failed at it last week, and the MACD rolled down. Green DI showing a little bit of, that it's tired a little bit, but we have to look at the strength of this trend. Look at the moving average complex, and I'm going to zero in on this again. Look at this moving average. Look at the 18 and look at the 40. They're moving up and they're in a very strong trending condition right now. So got to be very careful with something like this. Now, the 18 is getting really stretched away, and we're up at this big round number at 500. So does it make sense that this 500 area acts as resistance? Well, it definitely does. And now if we go to the daily chart, we're making a new high here, and ADX has not been able to cross above 25. But look at what green DI is doing. There is some strength in the green DI. We have to see if this can break out through 500 and get this ADX to confirm. We don't jump the gun. Just because this is below 25, we don't automatically look to short. We have to break this number. I think we have to break 450. I think that's the key. If we break the daily moving averages, then we have essentially confirmed this divergence. Up until that point, you're kind of guessing, because this could continue higher, and ultimately this could confirm to the upside. We need price to confirm this divergence, and if that's the case, and if it does happen that way, then yeah, I think this could be in for a deep pullback and potentially a test of 400, or maybe even a break of 400 if it plays out that way. Google here. So again, look at the quality of this trend. The 18 and the 40 are moving up at a parallel rate. Basically, it's not like the 18's climbing at a much faster rate. The ADX is confirming and rising. MACD is confirming and rising. I wouldn't be looking for a reversal in this. Now, I do recognize that the ADX has not confirmed here, but we need confirmation in price before we do anything. We don't do anything based on the indicator. And also, look at the volume pattern. Do you see how there's no sellers? Look at all the green bars above normal and no selling volume. So you got to kind of question what's going on with the ADX. We had this deep pullback that hurt the ADX a little bit. A couple of these deep pullbacks. This one here hurts ADX, but it's not, it closed near its high. So I think there's a little lag going on with the ADX line. So I wouldn't be all that concerned about this one right now. Unless we get stretched away or we show some signs of selling volume or something like that, I would be okay with holding this. Okay, CVNA. Look at this on the weekly chart. So really nice pullback. It didn't pull all the way back to the 18, but that's okay because this is rising. So I don't necessarily look for it to come all the way back when that's rising. We have crossed above the 18-month line. Now, what I've been telling my subscribers is if you have a declining 18-month, just like we talked about in the QQQ, so this is declining. That doesn't mean you can't take this trade. You can definitely take this trade, but use this to control the risk and treat it as a trading play, not as a big long-term move. I don't think this is going to be a long-term move. I think it's going to come up and then eventually pull back. But you can make a really nice trade here using the weekly and the daily. So I would watch for any kind of a little dip in this on the daily chart. I think it would look pretty good at that point. Look at DHI. So this is a stock in a group that has been really strong and overdue for some kind of a pause or a pullback. On the weekly chart, we're finally getting a pretty decent sized dip. This is overrunning and both of these lines are declining. We're getting this line to come down. Green DI finally dropped back down below 25. Now the sellers really aren't that strong. And again, I would probably be looking for more like a consolidation pattern, not a big reversal. Because the momentum conditions are very strong on the monthly and the weekly, I wouldn't be looking for a reversal to the downside. I just think before this is ready to get going again, back to the upside, it's probably going to take some time. Thanks for joining me. So my YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. I go into this subject matter in depth and give lots of examples. So if you have an interest, you can take a look there. Also, if you have a stock request, send it to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week and we'll see you next time.